my parents got divorced when I was 10, but they never really stopped fighting. And I think that was one of the things I remember in the program was learning that the definition of surrender is like cessation of hostilities, cessation of fighting. I was like, oh, I thought it meant you're lost. Because that's it. There was no retreat, no surrender. That's how I grew up.
Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery, where I help people heal their emotional, psychological, and spiritual wounds and make deep, lasting changes in their lives. I'm the founder and CEO of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting, LLC, where I coach people on how to develop healthy boundaries. On this podcast, I share my experience, strength, and hope from recovery. I don't support or endorse any particular 12-step recovery fellowship, and I don't claim to speak for any particular 12-step fellowship. I also don't believe that 12-step recovery is the only way to recover. You might need additional help. My hope is that you'll find my words concretely helpful in improving your life, whether you're in recovery or not. This is episode 150, guest episode with Alex, Addicted to Comfort. I want to welcome Alex to my podcast. I met Alex, I think 4 years ago, maybe it was 3 years ago, and I have watched his recovery with astonishment, and the way he's able to articulate his experience is just incredible, and I have no doubt that you are going to get a lot out of hearing him. So with that being said, take it away, Alex.
Hey, Barb. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure.
I think it was 2018, December 2018, where we met. I've changed a lot, I think, from that. Since
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just the big qualifier type stuff in terms of the recovery. I'm in 2 12-step programs, one for behavior and other people's behavior, where mine ends and theirs begins, and the other for substance, which for me is food. And I didn't realize how much it was sugar. That was something I was in denial about, because I think sugar is something that a lot of us get addicted to. It's like probably the first controlled substance or controlled substance. I think it probably should be controlled, that we're all exposed to. If you've ever seen a kid eat chicken nuggets with ketchup, you know there's such a thing as a sugar addiction. But yeah, so for me, that was something I was in denial about. I never believed I was like, wow, denial sounds like such a horrible thing. But that's what how I was for a lot of my issues. I was at my biggest, I was 525 pounds when I started this program. Or started addressing this with the 12 steps, I gained back to 519. And I was just like, I cannot do that again. And I don't want to see 525. And that's what made me finally go to a meeting. If I hadn't already been in a program for about 4 months, like I said, for behavior, and where we were talking about addiction, and I was realizing there that, and talking about substance abuse and people we love and how it affects us and how we're dealing with it. And I kind of realized while I was in there, they're talking about me, because I wasn't just someone who cared very much about people with addiction. I was an addict. I am an addict. And I think that's one of the big things about it, is that in those rooms, I learned things that were essential. One was that I got the first meeting. Take what you like, leave the rest. And as my sponsor says, that's changed now for me. Take what I need, leave the rest. Because sometimes what I need is not necessarily what I like. But the phraseology that you get is take what you like. That helps, because it's a big deal just to get my ass in those rooms.
Right.
So take what I need and don't tell me what I need. So I do think that was very important. And I think it also jives with this idea of a higher power for me, which also was major and massive. And in terms of our subject, addicted to comfort, something that now makes me comfortable in the moment, day to day, literally minute to minute, especially in crises, is being held by my higher power. And that was one of those things that I think I learned growing up. And part of it was so many of the things that sort of nurture me are things that have to do with balance, with lots of major powers on either side. So there's like a struggle, very often a conflict between the two. But I've learned to lean into that groundlessness, that there's something beautiful about that. There's something very dynamic in that. One of the things that I like is that idea that, the lunatic and the mystic are sort of awash in those same waters of the mind. Mm-hmm. It's just that the mystic can swim. The lunatic can't.
Good distinction.
So I do think that there's some things that, especially once it comes to a higher power, that I don't understand at all. They just work. And I think that's one of the beautiful things, is that the only real knowing is knowing I do not know. But so one of that idea of my higher power was that God is sort of a buffet. And of course that jives for a compulsive overeater. I love buffets. And, of course, there's a lot of danger potential at the buffet, because you could just slap that plate up with pudding, junk, cheese and bacon, and that's your meal. But there's also, you could, sort of pick the mythologies and the illusions that work for you. That's one of the, I majored in English in college. So, I read a lot of Shakespeare, and one of my favorite quotes is that there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And that is, what I think about will increase. So much of what has happened for me is a perspective shift, and that's much bigger than the 287 pounds, 280, yes, like that, 281 pounds, almost at 300 pounds here. Yeah, 281 and 3/4. I just see my note there.
That you've lost? That
I've lost, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big boxing guy, so I want to take credit for that 3/4. It's been since March 18th, 2019. That was my first day of abstinence. And, there's been a couple of relapses there. And I think that was one of the things about it, like I had mentioned, so that idea of God is a buffet, and take what I need, leave the rest. Those things were so important. And one of it was the idea of letting go. Because for me, I think I didn't realize what comfort was. A lot of times comfort I mistook for familiarity, because I'm really good at hurting myself but not feeling it. And one of the things that I'm celebrating, I'm still sort of on a natural high from it, is getting through my third Super Bowl in a row without hurting myself. I mean, that's pretty amazing. I was just somebody who's wired that, if the whole nation is saying, go ahead and do this, a lot of times I will say, no, I'm going to do the opposite. But with the Super Bowl, it's like it was a green light to overindulge. I would. And always go to bed in pain. Not even go to bed. By halftime, I was in pain. But not this year. And the last two, too. And that's just such a wonderful thing. I could remember someone saying early when I had started going to the 12-step program was that nothing tastes as good as abstinence feels. Like, that's somebody who has not had nachos. But now I'm somebody who has not had nachos in a long time. And I think that was the thing about it, was that for me, I sought comfort. Food was not my problem. It was my solution. It's just that my solution was killing me. A lot of it was, I love metaphors. So, and as you can see, well, actually, I removed all the sharks behind me because I know you don't like sharks.
I hate sharks. They scare me. I want to cry. Thank you. I can't even look at cartoons of sharks.
That idea that I was sort of floating in a shipwreck of my own making and clinging to, debris, both flotsam and jetsam. You can't really have one without the other. And, I'd gotten to know the sharks that would circle around, and I was comfortable in that wreckage. And that idea of maybe swimming just a little ways or letting go of the raft for a second to signal a, rescue boat, that just seemed impossible. Everything I've let go of has claw marks in it. And I think that is one of those things that's a big thing where I didn't realize I was really mistaking comfort. It's the same thing with, like, when I could just waste a whole day in front of the television. Mm-hmm. It's not that it's necessarily comfortable. It's that it's so familiar, I don't want to move. That idea of isolation. But for me, I think another thing is, so these elements of God for me, or higher power, I felt like there's things I could do. I had to, with that idea of taking a personal inventory and doing a food history. One of the things that when I had learned when I was 13 years old, I decided to become a vegetarian, and it became a really big fight with my father. And it was like just this grueling thing about masculinity. And I could remember him. He just didn't think that it was something I could do. My parents got divorced when I was 10, but they never really stopped fighting. And I think that was one of the things I remember in the program, was learning that the definition of surrender is like cessation of hostilities, cessation of fighting. I was like, oh, I thought it meant you're lost, because that there was no retreat, no surrender. That's how I grew up in terms of conflict.
Gotcha.
And I think that's what happened when I told my dad that I was going to become a vegetarian. Was it became a big fight. I, of course, did it anyway. And one of the things that, sort of I remember him saying was that if you do this, you're not the man. You're not the man of the family. My younger brother is. Because we were, I was the man of the family because we were living with a single mom. That's some of the language she used. Mm-hmm. So, hey, it was the 70s. Mm-hmm. And 80s, early 80s. I think that part of, of course, I was a vegetarian for 9 years, but then when I got into this program, that had to be a part of my higher power. Not only my higher power, but not so much my abstinence, but how I live, because there was a level of discomfort with the idea of every day of knowing where my food came from. And especially with this program, with the view of God that I have and of a higher power, it has so much to do with, I do not want to attach myself to suffering. I've been bullied and I've been a bully. And, in some weird ways, being a bully is almost harder, because when you're a bully, you have to care about what everybody thinks. Whereas when you're bullied, it's not the same pressure. At least that was my experience. And I think that sort of major trauma, I think, is lived out again and again in the animals we eat. Mm. For no reason. They are, looked at as commodities. And so I don't want to attach myself. I won't get too into it, but I don't want to attach myself to that. That's something I can do. And that's the big thing also that I learned about comfort, was that I can take it's awareness, acceptance, action is one, learning what I was capable of changing, accepting what I couldn't, and then doing something about it. And for me, I was like, you know what you can do? You can go vegan and stay vegan. Because I would always do it for a couple of months and then go right to Burger King or, always the worst of the worst, because I got something out of that idea. I got something, for me, there was a tremendous narcissistic pleasure in, again, a sort of comfort in loathing myself. And that was a way to do it, because I felt, you're such a hypocrite. You care so much about animals. What you ate today, look at the body count you must have put down. So that's something that, coming up in March, it'll be 3 years vegan. No matter how shitty things might feel during the day, that feels awesome. So that's something that I didn't realize how big of a deal that would be in just keeping me happy.
Well, it's about integrity. I mean, that's one thing that I've really learned. So the name of this podcast is Fragmented to Whole. And it's because my experience is that prior to recovery, I was a bunch of fragments, and I've integrated them into a coherent whole. And partly that means I have shored up my integrity. Like, when you're talking about that and the connection to higher power makes total sense to me, because you are living in line with what you value,
Yeah.
and that's, I don't care who your higher power is or what your higher power is, but that seems like something that would probably be an agreement of all higher powers, that, live in line with what you value, with what is important to you.
Absolutely. And I think that was, that also went in for me, had a lot to do with politics, because I was a dick about politics, because I used to love to fight with people. And again, some of it was, that's what me and my dad did. For a long time, I would just agree with him and be like, yes, yes. And I would learn. And that was, I think, I'm good at fighting. I learned from two really good fighters, mom and dad. So that lights me up, that conflict. There's a form of self-seeking. It's amazing. I've also gotten through one of the nastiest presidential elections there ever was without fighting with my friends. And that's crazy, because I was remembering this recently, talk about discomfort. I did a micro budget horror movie. That's a nice way of saying low budget. And I remember one day on the set where we were filming a scene, and somehow me and the director got in an argument about politics, and it got really heated. And I can remember the two of us. That was one thing you taught me, Barb, actually, or I learned from you, is like that idea. If I can't talk about it without raising my voice, well, that's a resentment. And so that was something I could watch for. And this was a day where, oh man, it was out of control. And I could just remember one of the actresses sitting there waiting for us to finish, just covering her ears, just talk about uncomfortable. But, it didn't make me stop. To me, winning the argument was everything, I'm not like that anymore. And I can remember actually one of the moments, you and I were coming home from a workshop, and I remember saying, remarking you in the car, I remember saying, I just spent a whole day or a couple of hours with all these people sharing these intimate things and talking about heavy stuff, and I don't know who any of them voted for. And you were like, and it's none of your business. And I was like, you're right. Right. And that was something that, I don't know, that used to make me, there was a level of comfort that I got in knowing that. And I realize now there's some things that I don't need to know. And sometimes I don't want to know. And being okay with me to not have that information. I don't know why that used to be, but I think so much of it was just not feeling comfortable in my own skin. and always feeling sort of inadequate in some way. So food was one of those ways to ground me.
Mhm.
And, I did it also with self-seeking and mansplaining. I love that. I love that the invented that word because I was like, oh man, now I know what I've been doing that my whole life.
Well, I want to say something about your talking about that it being familiar rather than comfortable. And I think I made this up, but what I say is that it's comfortable, but not comforting. And it's comfortable because it's so familiar. And the way I think of it is like there's this well-worn groove, and it's really easy to slide into the groove. It's harder to carve a new groove. It can be done, but the new groove can actually have comfort in it. It can actually feel good. And if you felt like shit about yourself your entire life, on some level, you don't believe you deserve to feel comfort or to be comforted. And you don't believe that you deserve peace. So I can see why, you were wanting to know what everybody's political affiliation is, because who am I going to argue with?
Yeah.
One of the other early memories I have of you is riding in the car, you driving, and you were trying to get onto the highway. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Do you want to?
I was merging on, and I was like, "Oh, look at this guy over here," and you put your hand on my arm, and you said, "It's happening. It's not happening to you." And at the moment, I was like, "Yeah, okay."
You were like, "You're not."
But it stuck with me. It's true. It is true. And I think that is, again, I love metaphors, and that is one that you could vividly see reinforced so often, is the next time you see somebody on the road who is like either on your bumper or something, it's not personal. Because if you let them pass and just don't engage it, they'll do it to someone else. So it had clearly, for me, it was like, oh, it's not me. They do that. I have no control over that.
Yeah.
That might be just, maybe they've got something going on. And you know something? Sometimes I've been like, and I think that's the other big thing of why the 12 steps programs work. And I think why meetings are places that make me feel comfortable. And that's crazy, because even the other night when I was going to a meeting, as I was getting in the car, it was cold. I had a cat on my lap. I was like, I don't want to go. I'll just Zoom. And I was like, no, I want to go. And it was one of those things where I've learned sometimes to do things that might be a little bit of discomfort, but it's going to be, I will feel so much better if I do it. And I think that's the thing, especially with meetings, was once I get there, Mamma Mia. I mean, it's amazing. It's literally an oasis in the modern world.
Yeah.
And for me, they've saved my life, because it really is a perspective shift. It used to be, we're sort of free falling into the future, but now I could look at that as a skydive. That's a big difference.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. About what you were just saying, that you do things that maybe seem difficult at first. I just had this conversation with some fellows the other day about, oh, this is really hard. I'm facilitating a step study, and they're like, oh, this is really hard. And I'm like, listen, if you're in recovery, you can do hard. You've been doing hard your whole fucking life. It's just that hard created more suffering. This hard is finite, and there's healing on the other side of it. So pick your poison, that hard or this hard. The hard that's comfortable but not comforting. So we're about at the end of time here. Is there anything that you wanted to share that you didn't get to?
Well, I think that idea of of the 12 steps, and I think part of this maybe because I'm such a comic book and movie geek, there's always the idea of a prequel. And if there was or is a step 0, I think it would have to be love yourself. But I think you get that when you go to meetings, because that sort of palpably occurs as you're taking step 1. And for me, that was so essential, because just sort of, and I think breaking through that terminal uniqueness, because I really thought, I'm going to be the worst person that's ever walked through this door. And finding out that, no, I'm not. I'm not the best. Yeah, I'm not the best, and I'm not
right.
The
you're
worst.
In the middle of the pack. Yeah,
and that's one of the things too. Because I remember my sponsor saying that early on, that this program, because I'm an extremes guy, a binary guy, and nothing guy. That's what my disease loves. And I think even adolescent, the Alex that's stuck in his adolescence, I love superheroes, lasers. There's not a lot of nuance there. There's very binary. I don't know. That's arguable. But anyway, the thing about this is I can remember him saying this program is about living in the gray space in the middle of the spectrum. Oh, that doesn't sound too fun. The thing is, that's where I found real joy, because the extremes always, it's almost like the radio's too loud, and I don't know what the hell, it's overwhelming. And when I'm in the gray space in the middle of the spectrum, I could actually feel what the hell's happening. Who would have thunk it?
That reminds me of how you opened with that. I don't remember how you said it, but it was like being comfortable with the, like, not knowing is sort of what you're saying, sort of that gray space. And so I just recorded an episode, which now I don't remember if it's going to be 148 or 149, it might be 148, where I was talking about how, like, I don't need to have my curiosity satisfied. I don't need to have closure on things the way I did before recovery. And it sounds like we're talking about the same thing. Like, I can live with lack of surety. Like, we always want to know what's going to happen. Well, one of my sponsors said, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm like, you've literally never known what's going to happen. You're just realizing it now. Like, you've believed you knew what was going to happen, and then you got pissed off when it didn't happen the way you wanted. But, we become comfortable with not knowing what the outcome is going to be. And it's easier to do that when you have a higher power.
Absolutely. And I think I can so relate to that. And I think that sometimes there was a lot of assumptions, and I can even still fall into that, where I'm having an argument with somebody and I'm doing them and me back and forth. That's how much I assume I know what they're thinking, what they would say. And I think that to some degree, it's kind of like the end of The Shining, where everything's going haywire, and they're just running from through the hallways, and in each room there are these horrors. That's sort of my own experience. If you've been traumatized, things you remember, and sometimes I've blown it out of proportion. Well, I don't have to stand in the frickin' doorway and look into that room and fixate on what's going on in the room. I could keep moving down the hall. And that, to me, I used to think, well, I want to be able to know what happened in there. But at some point, it's like, do you really need it? I think it's well-mown territory.
So close the door. Well, I think that's a good place to end. I will put in the show notes the link to the episode on comfortable versus comforting. In fact, I actually have a whole bunch of episodes like that. That's the perspective shift that Alex is talking about. So maybe what I'll do is put a variety of episodes that are about that perspective shift in the show notes. But I want to thank you again, not just for being a guest, but also for your recovery and being a fellow traveler in recovery with me. I get so much out of hearing you share. And believe me, people, you have not heard the half of it. There's so much that he says that is just, dripping with wisdom. And I wish you could hear it all. But thank you again, Alex. I appreciate you.
Thanks so much, Barbara. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
I was recently reminded by a friend that when I first started recovery, I didn't feel lovable. I almost can't believe that I used to feel that way, and that I kind of forgot something so profound, because I truly love myself now. And I want that for everybody. If you don't love yourself, there's literally nothing that can make up for that. I created something exclusively for my private clients, since many of them don't love themselves. And I've now opened up my private vault to share it with up to 10 people individually. It's called the Self-Love Sprint. You'll grow to love yourself and truly feel worthy, so you can stop saying yes when you really want to say no, stop neglecting yourself and putting everyone else first. Stop saying all kinds of nasty shit to yourself. That is not what people who love themselves and feel deserving do. You'll stop being afraid that others will think that you're selfish for taking time to care for yourself. This is also for you if you don't really know who you are because you've always been such a fucking chameleon. Go to higherpowercc.com/love sprint. Remember, I'm only offering 10 of these, so don't wait. If you like this podcast, and I'm guessing you did or you wouldn't still be listening, then you're gonna love the other things I have to offer. If you'd love pre-release podcast scripts and episodes before anyone else gets them, or if you'd love access to content from my private vault that I developed exclusively for my private clients, which is like having a work session with me without me actually being there, go to patreon.com/higherpowercoaching. There are 3 tiers ranging from as low as $4 up to $24 a month. You'll also love my weekly newsletter, Friday Fragments, which has content very similar to the podcast. You can check it out at fridayfragments.news. That's fridayfragments.news. Please like and subscribe to my podcast on your favorite podcast outlet. I'd also love it if you'd leave a review, which you can do either in the show notes or on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other people find my podcast so they can get the benefits you've gotten from listening. If someone came to mind when you listened to this particular episode, please share it with them. And my favorite place to hang out on social media is Instagram. I'm at Higher Power Coaching. Please DM me there. I'd love to hear what you got from this episode. I run group and private coaching programs on building healthy boundaries. Whether you need help with boundaries in your personal, professional, or romantic life, I can help. Head on over to barbchat.net, where you can hop onto my calendar for a free 30-minute Better Boundaries consultation. My ideal client is someone who is ripe for change. If that's you, I would love to work with you. My goal with all my work is to help you make lasting changes in your life, like I've made deep, lasting changes in my life. Remember, it's never too late to recover. No one is beyond hope, and healing is possible. Thanks for listening.